We're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Dr. Dave Hall. Dr. Dave Hall is chair of the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action. He's also on the board of directors of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility and past national president of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Start out and tell us both about Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility and the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action.
Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility is the local affiliate of Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is the United States affiliate of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, the winners of the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize for the work that was done between the U.S. and the Soviet Union back in the early 80s. And we've been involved as physicians and other concerned citizens trying to eliminate nuclear weapons, recognizing the just overwhelming devastation that these weapons will generate. I first got involved in 1979 at a Grand Rounds when I was training as a psychiatrist, and Dr. Judith Lipton showed documentary film footage from the aftermath of the bombing of Hiroshima, and became involved with PSR as soon as I finished my child psychiatry training in 1983 when my kids were about 8 and 11, same time that the day after came out, and a little later got involved in National PSR and have been involved with anti-nuclear issues ever since. Got involved with the Ground Zero community in the middle 80s, right after the time when a number of local folks were aware that nuclear warheads were being shipped by train to the Bangor submarine base right here on Hood Canal, just 20 air miles west of Seattle. It turns out that currently the Navy base there, the Bangor sub base, has almost 1/4 of the entire active U.S. nuclear arsenal just right here in our own backyard. So we became very involved in civil resistance as well as education and other actions trying to bring to awareness the close proximity of these weapons of mass destruction right here in our own backyard. There have been some fun things that have occurred along the way. Ironically, in the lead up, for example, to the Iraq War, Libby Davies, who was a member of the parliament in Canada, was responding to the United States claiming that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so she came down here saying, I'm looking for weapons of mass destruction in the U.S., and came to join with us. And we had a press conference at the ferry terminal and went over to Bangor to see if we could find any weapons of mass destruction over at the Trident subbase. Well, of course they were there. Just the ironies of the ways in which U.S. policy gets formed without paying attention to what the United States is doing. So that's how I've been involved, and continue now to be involved with Ground Zero. We had a house fire back in 2005 on the property that the founders of the organization were savvy enough to purchase back in 1977. And in the last 3 years, I've been chair of the building committee. I'm actually not chair of the stewardship council, which is the leadership council, but chair of the building committee. And we put together a beautiful house out at the 4-acre property that we have right adjacent to the Bangor base. Our backyard fence is the barbed wire of the Trident base. And we will have on Saturday of next week, August 8th, we'll have a dedication of the new house in concert with the whole weekend action, the Nagasaki weekend action at the Ground Zero site. It starts on Saturday morning and goes through to probable direct action early Monday morning.
Yeah, you have a lot of great people coming in to both speak and participate in next weekend's actions.
There are a number of folks. Brian Wilson, who some folks in Seattle have actually had a chance to hear, but a very articulate, committed individual who actually lost both his legs when a Navy train in, I think it was San Diego or near California, in California, ran him down when he was attempting to stop one of the munitions trains there. This was back in the 80s as well, I believe. Brian will be here. Jim and Shelley Douglas will be here. They're coming back from Birmingham, Alabama, where they moved in following the Trident train system. It turns out that the weapons were coming from Pantex in Texas up here to Bangor, and the Trax campaign traced those trains and developed a campaign along the tracks. It turns out that the tracks also went out to Kings Bay, Georgia, which is the Atlantic coast Trident base, and Jim and Shelley moved out to Birmingham to be along the tracks there and work that issue some years back. So they'll be here as well.
I don't think many people in Seattle and or Washington State quite realize the unique position we're in, kind of in between the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, where a lot of the materials were originally made for the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, I believe.
That's correct.
And then realizing that probably the largest repository of nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere resides just 20 miles from Bangor. I mean, from Seattle at Bangor. Can you paint us a little more of a picture about what resides at Bangor?
What we understand resides at Bangor. The SWIFPAC, the Storage Weapons Facility Pacific, is a large storage facility on the base where they have a number of bunkers, perhaps in the hundreds, where they store, I understand, both inactive and possibly active nuclear weapons. They also have the facilities to handle what I think is now 8 of the Trident-class submarines, along with weapons handling wharf, where they essentially put the missiles in and out of the submarines. It's a large base facility. About 30,000 people work on the base, is my understanding, and they have all of the crew as well. They have apparently 2 separate crews for the Trident subs. Of those 8 subs, it's my understanding that they are still essentially on a Cold War patrol schedule. They're going out about as often and going out about as long as they had been doing when the Soviet Union was still present and threatening. So it's a situation where we are at high alert. These weapons are all targetable within 30 seconds to a minute, given appropriate commands. The Navy folks are training on a regular basis for using these weapons. These weapons are ready to go, from all I know, and the rest of the base is there to support that. It's interesting that in 1996, the United Nations General Assembly asked the World Court to rule on the question about whether the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons could be legal under international law. And the court came down unanimously, including the United States juror on that court, that under virtually every circumstance conceivable, that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons would be illegal under international law. The one exception was the possibility that a country's entire existence might be at stake, and then there was still a question about whether they would be legal or not. This was based largely on a reading of international humanitarian law and laws of war, which require the distinction between combatants and non-combatants. These weapons are entirely indiscriminate, and the level of devastation of these weapons is virtually inconceivable. We rightly became very upset that the World Trade Centers were destroyed and the thousands of people that died there, 3,000 or 4,000 people that died in that. was a crime against the country. We have to remember, though, that the nuclear weapons that have been used, and they've only been used twice, once by the United States on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and once on Nagasaki with the plutonium from Hanford on August 9th, 1945. And in those instances, almost instantaneously, there were tens of thousands of people who were killed, many of them vaporized, just no evidence at all left, given that these weapons generate the temperatures of the sun at the surface of the earth. So the notion that these are usable in any way within what would be what has been the developing body of international law, international humanitarian law, it's just not true. There's no way these can be used and meet any standard of human decency. So again, we're in this dilemma where the weapons themselves were developed at a time of great evil. These weapons were developed in the late 30s and the 40s as the Nazi response to the difficulties in resolving the conflict of World War I, when the Nazis were taking over in Germany. The great fear was that somehow or another Nazi scientists who were brilliant would develop these horrible weapons first, and then the rest of the world would be subject to the fascist control of the Hitler regime. So the United States, with Britain and help from some other countries, mostly the United States and Britain, pulled together a rapid scientific effort to get there first, to create the bomb first. And this was eventually turned into the Manhattan Project, which was staffed by scientists, many of whom were refugees from fascist Europe. And these folks were passionate about both the science and about making sure that the fascist regimes of Europe, especially the German Hitler regime, not get these weapons first. So the birth of nuclear weapons policy and programs in the United States comes out of this effort to prevent the horrible evil that was fascism from taking over the world. The problem is these weapons don't discriminate fascist from communist, from Republican, from Democrat, from anything. And we are now left with the legacy. So the challenge currently is, as the president currently says, we need to eliminate these weapons. They are not usable in any civilized circumstance anywhere. The Trident system is a first strike weapon. The Ground Zero community actually grew out of the understanding that Bob Aldridge had when he was working for Lockheed on the guidance system for the Trident system in the early 70s. And he left Lockheed and essentially told the rest of the community that we were building a first strike weapon, and that that was not okay. And it was out of that information that the Ground Zero community became aware of what was going on and became aware of the Trident system coming to Hood Canal. So that's some of the background. Currently, we actually had a fascinating conversation with the base commander, Mark Olson, and a number of his staff came at our invitation and met at the unfinished new Ground Zero house in early June, along with a dozen or so of us from the Ground Zero community. And we had a very heartfelt, direct conversation for a couple of hours talking about our concerns about these weapons as I've been describing them, and coming to understand the Navy personnel's heartfelt commitment to service to country. It was a wonderful conversation where we were really able to recognize that we are all deeply committed to what is hopefully the best interest of our country in the long run. We're coming at it from different sides of the barbed wire right now, but that our hearts are very much in the same place. And we didn't get far enough in the conversation to push the Navy folks about, do you want these nuclear weapons or not? But it's been very clear in our work along the way that there's a great deal of support on the Bangor base for eliminating these weapons. They create a great deal of havoc, a great deal of distress for those that have to deal with them on a regular basis. Just to give you an example, in 2003, there was an accident in the unloading of one of the missiles off one of the submarines. Glenn Milner of the Ground Zero community was able to discover this in a Freedom of Information request. But it turns out that the crew that was unloading this missile put the ladder down the tube to hook the hoist cable onto the nose cone of the missile in order to winch it out of the submarine. Left for lunch, and then whoever came back to finish winching the missile out of the tube either forgot or didn't know there was a ladder there, and they pulled the missile up into the ladder, where the ladder punctured the nose cone of the missile, and the end of the ladder ended up within, my understanding was about within a foot of the warheads on the bus at the top of the missile. This didn't come out publicly until, I guess, several years later through the willingness of some of the folks on the base to leak the information to one of the folks that was monitoring Broken Arrow or accidents in the military. And we discovered it from there. We understand that the entire senior command was relieved as a consequence of that when this finally came out. So these sorts of things are a part of the hassle that the Navy has to deal with, that they have to be very careful that their personnel are mentally sound, that they're able to work competently and carefully. So it was a very, I think, reassuring at some level conversation that we had with Commander Olson and his folks in understanding that they're very good people, well-trained people on the Bangor base that are currently in charge of these weapons. And it's been my contention for quite a while that we rely on the folks in the Navy to keep these weapons safe, protected, so that we don't have any accidents, we don't have any illicit access to these weapons, pending what is the responsibility for the rest of us, which is to get rid of these things. It's up to the public to change United States policy. And we finally have a break in the action here with President Obama making this a significant priority in his administration. We're certainly hopeful that the work that he is doing with Russia currently and elsewhere will see real benefits in eventually being able to get rid of these weapons. What we need to keep in mind, though, is that nuclear weapons are still at the heart of United States military policy. So we are also hopeful that in the 2010 Nuclear Posture Review and the other military strategy reviews that we'll see a real shift away from these weapons.
Yeah, I know recently President Obama had said that they were looking at reducing the active number of U.S. warheads by what? It looked like about half, a couple thousand was what I thought I read in the paper.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are. Under the prior agreements by 2012, we were supposed to get down to somewhere between 1,700 and 2,100 active weapons. I think the current negotiations that the president is pursuing will get us down to 1,500, 1,600 active weapons. we're still in a range where, understand, each one of these weapons is a city destroyer. The weapons on the Trident submarine, for example, the W-88 warhead, is a 450 kiloton hydrogen bomb. The Hiroshima bomb was an atomic bomb that was rated at about 12 to 13 kilotons, 1,000 tons of TNT equivalent. These weapons are 450,000 tons. They're almost 30 times larger than the Hiroshima bomb. The devastation of these weapons is roughly a 5-mile radius. If it were dropped on Seattle, you'd have a 10-mile diameter of just horrible destruction. Within the first half a mile or so, you'd have complete devastation. You'd have a hole in the ground. You'd have vaporized life. Out to 5 miles, you have all the blast and burn, third-degree burns. You have destroyed the entire medical system in the city, and then you have just thousands of folks with serious injuries. The state of Washington has, I think, less than 50 burn beds, most of them at Harborview. We'd be talking about generating hundreds of times that number of casualties with just a single one of these weapons. So again, just keeping in mind the extraordinary horror that these weapons are, this is terrorism well beyond what we use politically as a term. It's interesting that Justice Weeramantry, who is, I believe, from Sri Lanka, was the chair of the International Court of Justice that ruled on the illegality of the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons in 1996. He makes the comment that the world has seen the rampage of Genghis Khan as being sort of a quintessential definition of barbarism. Genghis Khan would come into a community and he would say, if you don't completely submit, I'm not only going to wipe out you, everybody in your town, but I'm going to level the town. There will be nothing left. And that was his rampage across Asia, historic in its brutality. And yet that doesn't hold a candle to what these weapons do. The barbarism of these weapons is logarithmically greater than what Genghis Khan did. And yet we have difficulty getting our moral sense around this. So that's why we do the work we do. That's why I work with Physicians for Social Responsibility. That's why I work with the Ground Zero community, is that to allow even one of these weapons ever to be used in war again would be just a horrible crime.
And you deal with psychology, psychiatry. I mean, you have to wonder what the rest of the world thinks of us when we're constantly, using this as a backdrop. You need to cooperate with us. If you don't, look at what we've got for you.
There's, ongoing ironies to all of this. As a child family psychiatrist, I, for example, will be referred the kids who will bring weapons to school and then have to have a professional evaluation before they're allowed back in school. Since Columbine, since the shootings at Columbine High School in Colorado, our local schools, and I think this is probably true around the country, have a zero tolerance for weapons in the school systems. So I'll get referred kids that bring knives to school or do other things who get expelled pending professional assessment of presumably their dangerousness and other issues that would mean that would explain their bringing a weapon to school. Michael Moore in Bowling for Columbine does this wonderful humorous juxtaposition of all of the concern about these kids who murder 11, 12 other people in themselves in high school. And then they go over to Lockheed, to the Lockheed plant, which is right there in the same community, and talk to the PR person with this enormous missile in the background saying, you know, we don't have any violence in this community. We don't know where this comes from. I think it's important for us to understand that as a country, the United States has been very aggressive militarily. We have been involved in continuous warfare. If you look back, Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Grenada, you look at the ways in which the United States military has been very aggressive in other parts of the hemisphere as well as in other parts of the world, and you realize, you know, we have a very, very mean side to us in relation to the rest of the world. The School of the Americas, which has now got another name that kind of whitewashes it, has been training terrorists to lead military in other countries. So it's, you know, we have this very aggressive military side of our culture. We also have a video game and, you know, movie, public media, entertainment media that is full of violence with very little information about the actual consequences of violence. You know, in these things, you know, you shoot up somebody, the car tips over, get right back up again, nobody's hurt. There was just an awful accident up on Lopez Island here recently where, you know, a 15-year-old kid without a license apparently was driving 90 miles an hour and killed a jogger on the side of the road. I don't know if this was, you know, one of the car chase video scenes sort of played out or what the story was, but there's a lot in the sort of usual media context in which we live that says that violence is okay, violence is fun, violence is entertainment, and yet we miss out until we stop and think about it, just how awful these events are for an individual family, for example, when something like this happens, or certainly when a whole city is destroyed. It's just unimaginable.
Well, with that, we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Mike, thanks for asking me.
Again, we have been talking with Dr. Dave Hall. He is with the Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action, and you can find out more about their upcoming events starting next weekend at their website, gzcenter.org.